All right, let's go on the record. This is case 10-19-4091, State versus Brian Grips. We're here for a status conference, possible change of plea. All right. Appearing for the defendant, James Archibald, Alyssa Assoff, appearing for the state. Make sure I get this right. Jessica Quinn, Jeff Nye, also present as the defendant. Mr. Archibald, is there an agreement then?
Yes, Your Honor. I filed a plea agreement last night. It should be on your computer this morning. We reached an agreement at mediation on January 27th.
You reviewed this agreement with Mr. Grips to where you believe he is participating in this agreement freely and voluntarily.
Yes.
Anything else you want to add before I talk to Mr. Grips?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Grips, I'm going to ask you questions about these charges, this plea agreement. I do need your responses under oath, so if you'll please stand or raise your right hand, my clerk will put you under oath.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this pending cause shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, you can have a seat, thank you. This is a pretty important step, Mr. Grips. I want to make sure you're thinking clearly. Are you currently under the influence of any medication, alcohol, or drugs?
Oh, I had no medication this morning, but no drugs or alcohol.
All right. Does the medication make you foggy? Is it having an effect on your thinking process?
No, sir.
Do you feel like you are thinking clearly?
What's that, sir?
Do you feel like you are thinking clearly at this point?
Yes, sir.
All right. As you recall, the charges filed in this just going to review those with you. Count 1 was murder in the first degree. That is a felony. It carries a potential penalty of up to death, life imprisonment with a minimum 10 years, up to a $5,000 compensatory fine, up to a $50,000 fine. Count 2 was rape. That is a felony carrying a potential penalty of up to life imprisonment and up to a $50,000 fine. Do you have any questions about those charges or the potential penalties?
No.
And I have been provided with the plea agreement. Have you had a full chance to review the plea agreement?
Yes, I have.
And did you sign the agreement?
Yes, I have.
All right, we're just going to go through that so we both understand what that provides. Looking at paragraph 1, it provides that you would plead guilty to counts 1 and count 2.
Yes.
All right, and with the guilty plea to counts 1 and count 2, then the recommendation would be for a sentence of 20 years fixed, life indeterminate. You'd receive credit for time served. And that's the essence of the agreement. Does that sound like the agreement to you?
That is correct.
All right. The agreement goes on that it's binding on the court, which is a little bit of a misnomer. If I decide not to go along with this agreement, what it means is that you would have the right to withdraw your guilty plea. If I decided at the time of sentencing to go along with the sentencing recommendations as set out in this agreement, then you would not have the right to withdraw a guilty plea. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
So ultimately, I have discretion whether or not to follow the recommendations in the agreement, and that's just authority and discretion I have. Do you have any questions about that?
No, I do not.
The agreement goes on that you'll do an allocution. We'll do that in just a few minutes. You're waiving your right to appeal. The sentence in this case, again, that's in the event I follow the plea agreement. You remain in custody and then at some point committed to the Department of Corrections, possibly with a recommendation. So that is how I read the agreement. Do you think there's anything else that you've agreed to that should be part of the agreement that we haven't talked about?
No,
Do you feel like you're being pressured or forced into this agreement?
no,
Do you feel like you are participating in this agreement freely and voluntarily?
yes,
Are you on probation or parole in any other matter?
no,
With the plea of guilty, I order a pre-sentence report. That report will give me information regarding your background, work history, family history, any prior criminal history. Those are all things I look at. They help me with the sentencing. Frankly, they will help me with that type of background decide whether or not I'm going to abide by the plea agreement, follow the plea recommendations. That's the significance of a pre-sentence report. Do you have any questions about that process?
no, I do not.
There is an expectation that you would participate and help with the preparation of that report by filling out a questionnaire, meeting with the pre-sentence investigator, and providing background as requested. Do you have any questions about that?
No,
Certain civil rights are affected by a felony conviction. You lose the right to vote, the right to be in possession of a firearm, the right to be on a jury. Those are some of the civil rights affected by a felony conviction. Do you have any questions about that?
no, I do not.
But for a plea agreement, we would go forward with a trial in this matter, and at that trial, it would be the state's burden of proof. In other words, the state would have the responsibility to present evidence to convince a jury of 12 that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the state's responsibility. You're not required to prove anything, but you do have the right to present evidence at that trial. You can cross-examine the state's witnesses. You could call your own witnesses. You could even testify on your own behalf. But that would have to be your decision. Nobody can force you to testify. The important thing to understand is that with a plea of guilty, you are waiving or giving up your right to a jury trial. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
And you would be waiving or giving up your right to require the state to prove your guilt. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Do you feel like there's anything else you need to do or have your attorneys do before going forward with this change of plea?
No,
Based on everything we discussed, then, is it still your intent pursuant to this plea agreement to plead guilty to count 1 and count 2?
yes, I do.
All right. Count 1, as set out in the information, is a charge of murder in the first degree. How do you plead?
Guilty.
All right. Tell me what you did, which makes you guilty of this charge.
Well, I was with the murder one. All I really know is what I told the detectives that night in the interrogation was I went over there with the intent to just rape her. I was pretty high on cocaine and alcohol. I had a pocket knife with me, and I just remember for an altercation, just a slap upside my head, and that's all I really remember. I didn't mean to murder her. I didn't think I did, but I guess it happened. I do remember. I remember one of the, I remember, that's about all I remember for the first charge, I guess. But because I went over there, like I said, with the intent to just rape her. But I didn't, and I didn't mean to murder her. I guess it just happened during the, when I was there, but I remember, you know, the rape part, I remember pulling down her pants and coming on her belly. And then I remember leaving. That's about all I remember of that evening.
All right, as to count one, the charge is, and just so we're clear, that you unlawfully killed or murdered Angie Dodge. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
I guess it'd be accurate.
This is alleged to have occurred about June 13th, 1996. Does that sound right?
I guess, yeah.
Did this all occur in Bonneville County?
Yes.
Count two is the charge of rape. How do you plead to count two?
Guilty.
All right, tell me what you did which makes you guilty of count two.
As I said just before, I just remember pulling down her pants and then coming on her belly. That's about all I remember of that as well.
Part of the allegation of that is that she resisted, but you overcame that resistance with force or violence, or the threat of force or violence. Is that accurate?
I guess so, yes.
This is alleged to have occurred about June 13th, 1996, the same date. Is that accurate?
I guess,
And again, occurred in Bonneville County.
yes.
Ms. Quinn, are you satisfied with that?
Your Honor, for the purpose of the allocution, I would ask if Mr. Drips can recall what he did with the knife. I don't think we have that part, and I think there's some additional details during the interrogation that he remembers at least part of that.
All right, Mr. Dreps, part of the question, part of the allocution is, in what manner, what did you do with your pocket knife?
I don't really remember much. I might have hit it to her neck, but that's about all I can remember.
Do you remember cutting the victim's throat?
No, no, sir.
Do you deny that that occurred?
I don't deny it. I mean, I can't remember it though, but
Ms. Quinn?
Yes, Your Honor, that's sufficient.
Based upon the statements of defendant, the court finds the defendant understands the nature of the charges against him and the consequences of a guilty plea. The court finds there's a factual basis for the plea and that it is being made freely and voluntarily. I'll therefore accept that, direct the clerk to enter that guilty plea. We'll set this matter for sentencing. I will order a pre-sentence report on this as well.